How would you like to write a web app with no boilerplate code at all? Sound good? Let's give it a shot. We'll use Meteor on the back end, React on the front end, and a new framework called J tying them together. And CoffeeScript will make our life easier too. Okay, here's the web app we want to make. A simple front end for a database of books and authors with just a little bit of interactivity. Like I can change this limit to 8 or click Show Authors, and you can see the page reactively updates along with the URL in the address bar. Cool, so this is basically the simplest web app ever. We've all built this a million times, and we're all sick of it because there's usually so much boilerplate. So with Meteor and React and JFramework, we'll make it quick and painless. It's one file, it's 97 lines of code, and actually it's all client-side. No Ajax handlers, no Meteor.publish, nothing server-side. First, we define our models, book and author. Easy. The only thing to notice is this helper function called book.author, which implements foreign key semantics for the author ID field just like you'd expect. By the way, j.defineModel is a custom ORM layer on top of Meteor's Mongo.collection. Now we define a single React component called books page, and we give it these state variables, limit and show authors. Now look how easy it is to bind our books page component to the URL in the address bar. We give it a special mixin called j.routable. We use React Router to define the path /books. We define how the component state drives reactive changes in the URL query string, which is enough to get us this behavior. And vice versa, we define how the URL query string can drive the component's initial state, which is enough to get us this behavior. Finally, our React component needs a render function. We'll have it return a div containing another div to hold our input elements. Under that, we'll synchronously fetch some books from our database. What? Oh, you say it's impossible to synchronously fetch from the database without hanging the JavaScript thread? Don't worry, it's actually happening asynchronously. But JFramework's abstraction layer lets us write code as if we have synchronous access to our entire database inside our React components. If you've ever used Meteor's auto-publish feature for rapid prototyping, you know how useful that is. The difference is that JFramework only queries for the exact data you need, so you can let your database get pretty big without hurting performance. So we'll map each book object to a table row component, and each book's table row component is going to have 3 cells, a cell for the row index, a cell for the book's cover pick, and a cell for the book's title and author. And that's it! That's our 97 lines of code. Not bad, huh? Okay, let's look under the hood. How does JFramework manage fetching all these books and authors? JFramework's trick is to have the client reactively compute the set of all the MongoDB cursors that it wants to observe. Then it only takes one Meteor subscription to observe all the cursors at once. Here in the Chrome console, you can see the cursor that the client is using to observe a query for 5 books. When the user changes the limit to 7, we don't need the old cursor anymore, so there's a minus sign to show that the client is dropping it, and a plus sign to show that it's replacing it with a new cursor whose limit is 7. How about when we click Show Authors? Wait, before I show you that, let's take another look at the code and see if we can predict how it's going to work. We're calling book.author for each book, which means we're calling author.fetch1 7 times. The naive implementation is to make 7 round trips to the server, and that would be pretty terrible. Okay, so what actually happens? Looks like we've added just a single cursor to observe the author IDs C. Dickens, J. Austen, J. Steinbeck, and M. Twain. JFramework is good about batching these fetch requests. We can be inside this mapper function and just shamelessly call fetch1 on each iteration. We can pull that off with no performance penalty. Batching your foreign key lookups is one of the boilerplate headaches you don't have to worry about with JFramework. Alright, then what happens if we set the limit back to 5? Notice how Jane Austen is only the author for book number 7. So when we set the limit back to 5, again, we have a new book cursor whose limit is 5, and we also have a new author cursor that doesn't ask for J. Austen anymore, because we don't need that ID. Pretty cool. And of course, this is Meteor, so we get full reactivity to database changes, like if we update M. Twain to use his real name. Then we're looking at The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Samuel Clemens. Or we can take away his author credit altogether. You can see it now says the author of Huckleberry Finn is John Q. Public, and we have a new author cursor whose ID selector includes J. Public. Well, this has just been a quick introduction, but hopefully you can already see how Meteor plus React plus JFramework is a powerful combination for rapid prototyping web apps.